Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, amazing, Craig. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I'm talking to Nabeel El Khafif, CEO and I believe founder of Ego, the next generation of ride sharing. And when I first saw Ego, I thought, Super Id and Ego and that kind of stuff, but it means something different. So first of all, tell us a little bit about Ego and what it means and why you started it.
Well, ego. I mean, it's kind of a play on words. You did hit on some of the concepts we were going for when we named the company, but it's supposed to be like a play on like email or e-transfer, so ego. But it also relates to your sense of self-importance and the philosophy behind what is an ego. And you have good egos and bad egos, big egos and small egos. But this ego will go anywhere you go.
And not only that, but the one part that didn't really get me right away when you mentioned it is that you're trying to be zero emission and very friendly, or at least as close to that as you can possibly be.
We're trying our best, and that actually came about by accident. It wasn't really our mandate when we founded the company. We were just trying to create an alternative to the big boys that are out there, and there is no alternative in the Canadian marketplace. But it came about kind of as a pivot a semi pivot that we had to undertake, and that was that we started working with taxis. And because the taxis are like 98% hybrid, it just came about as a happy accident that, okay, well we have all hybrid cars now. So let's keep rolling with that and let's continue. It's a good position to have. And if it's something we can do, why not? So it's a happy accident, really.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's another thing, another lever for success and growth potentially.
Definitely, definitely. We think we've got a lot of little nuances that overall make us, more than the sum of our parts and a better alternative. So definitely.
So before we get back into why this company and your journey here, I like to go back to what the entrepreneur was like as a child. Were you a handful for your parents? Were you studious? Were you into sports, music?
I was uh, I was into a little bit of everything as a kid, but I was definitely not a handful. At least not in my early years. I was probably like the model child, the model student. I was pretty academically gifted. I skipped 3 grades uh, in my regular schooling. I was like 6 years ahead in math, so I was very academically focused. We can say I enjoyed sports and music, but all my focus as a youngster was put on academics. And then probably when I got to university and I started to have a little more freedom of choice, I became somewhat of a rule breaker. I didn't, you go through your rebellious phase, but I definitely went through a period where I tested a lot of rules. I broke a lot of rules. I tried to question a lot of authority. So, so I kind of had those two phases. But as a youngster, I was no far from a handful, far from a rebel. I was very much a model student.
And you said something like you were 6 years ahead in math?
Yeah, so that was I was like the math kid. So I actually used to take a bus. So I had already skipped, I think, 2 grades at that point when I was in grade 8. And then a bus used to come and pick me up from my junior school or my middle school and take me to high school so I could do grade 11 math. So I was doing grade 11 and 12 math while I was in grade 8, and I would have been the age of someone in grade 6. So I was like, and I used to win like those University of Waterloo and the Champ and all those math competitions. I would always, if not win, place very highly. So I've long forgotten all that math, but that was kind of my thing when I was little.
That's amazing, that's great to know. And it's a quite dichotomy when you're doing something like that in potential high school classes when you're your age. I think of Doogie Howser and some of the maybe not quite at that level, but from a TV show and the dichotomy of how do you make friends in those kinds of environments when
That was the huge difficulty. I mean, even regardless of the 6 year math, they used to call me Doogie or whatever, and I was like this little 11-year-old in grade 12. So, but yeah, that you've caught on to is like making friends, and like I also used to move around a lot, so I would never spend more than 2 or 3 years in the same school. So I had that double whammy of being 3 years younger than everybody else, being kind of ostracized for being a geek, and then also being transplanted or uprooted every couple of years and having to rebuild a social circle. I think looking back, it ended up being a great advantage, like learning how to make friends and how to socialize and learning that independence that comes from being uprooted over and over again. Of course, when I was younger, I hated it.
I hate it. The similar. My parents were kind of entrepreneurial, and they changed jobs and things all the time, and so I was changing schools constantly. But the one thing it has given me is, among other things, is I can judge people's characters really quickly. When you're that strange kid in the class and you're trying to figure out, and this is like your 10th school this year, and you're trying to figure out who's going to bully you and who's not, there's a lot of subtle signs you learn pretty quick.
For sure, yeah. Different types of people, like you meet more types of people than you would ordinarily meet if you had a close
Yes.
friend.
And I think that's it because you do meet way more because if you're growing up in one school, one group of say 20 or 30 friends that come and go in your life, you know that. But if you're constantly being put into another classroom with a bunch of different people that you didn't grow up with that don't know you and you're trying to assess that situation, yeah. And I guess that just compounded with me now that I run events for a living. And before COVID, I'd meet hundreds of people every month. Now it's kind of through the screen, so it's
Yeah,
and when I say judge a people, it's, the way they talk and the way they're saying their questions and stuff. I can quickly tell if they're moving their startup forward or they're not moving their startup forward and stuff now, and if they're taking this seriously or not. So it's just those types of things that you kind of subtly pick up. And I guess probably now they would call it your EQ. I have a fairly high EQ because of being forced in those situations, and I bet you're the same.
yeah. That would be definitely one of the advantages that came about from that situation.
So you loosened up a little bit in university.
Mhm.
But what did at that point in time did you want to be an entrepreneur, or were you looking at an accounting career path?
I don't think I knew, and frankly, it's going to sound strange, but I still don't think I know. I mean, you do things, right? Like if that makes me an entrepreneur, then that's what I am. I did realize pretty early on when I was at Waterloo in my undergrad that like I don't like working for anyone else. I realized I didn't have the personality that where I could be an employee. It was very hard for me to be motivated. So I definitely had that from a young age. Looking back, I never thought about it at the time, but I was always kind of involved in like little business ventures. Like I used to mod PlayStations. I don't know if I should be admitting this on the air, but like when we were in high school, I'd get people wanted to mod their PlayStation. So I figured out how to solder the motherboards and I would even sell insurance. So I can't remember the prices now, but I'd be like, okay, it's $30 to mod the system and another $20 if you want insurance for 6 months. And I pretty much knew it wasn't going to break in 6 months. So it was just an extra $20, but people would buy it. So there was stuff like that. I'd do like door-to-door sales, all sorts of little kind of business ventures that would last 3 to 6 months, things like that. So I guess it was there, but I never really thought about it. I never really thought of myself, I want to be an entrepreneur one day. Maybe I'm not part of the mold like that, but I just kind of found myself here, I guess.
So at some point you decided to start Ego.
Yeah.
What were you doing when the idea came to you?
Okay. So the idea didn't actually come to me. So I was actually an investor in a company called InstaRide back in 2015 when Uber was still very new. I don't know if you've heard of InstaRide.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah. Okay. So InstaRide was a company was pretty much trying to do the same thing we're trying to do now, trying to be an alternative to Uber, which at the time was a monopoly in Canada. They had no other competition. I would still consider them more or less a monopoly. But yeah, this guy who was in my social circle, he started this company and he was constantly pitching it to me. And eventually I took a look at the opportunity and some of the numbers around it. And I realized, this is actually a really big opportunity that nobody's taking advantage of. And we'll come back to probably why nobody's taking advantage of this opportunity. So I invested in that company, and then to protect my investment, I realized quickly, and this is one of the other lessons you learn quickly, is you bet on the jockey and not the horse. But it wasn't the right jockey, so I had to protect my investment. I got more and more involved with that company. We ended up doing pretty well over a period of 6 to 8 months. We took them to Dragon's Den. We got a deal, and then. I ended up around the time of Dragon's Den, I was butting heads a little bit with the leadership of that company, so I ended up parting ways. It went on to get even more financing, which just goes to prove to you that money does not solve every problem. But because the management was not adequate, it ended up not being successful. However, the idea remained, the opportunity remained. Nobody took advantage of it. So it came to a point where I was approached by another group of people and said, Nabeel, like you have, experience in this domain, running this company. Nobody's taking advantage of this opportunity. Why don't we try? And that was a couple of years ago. It's taken us quite a bit of time to get to where we are now. But yeah, it was largely because we saw the opportunity in the market and we wanted to exploit it.
So I like to talk about opportunity costs. You obviously, somebody was thinking you as their friends and family round. You're going to be an investor. I know somebody's going to give me 20 or 50K, and you invested in this, and then at some point decided, okay, why don't we, with these other people, go at this again a second time?
Yeah.
Why this opportunity, versus another opportunity?
I mean, there's no real what for me. The real reason is just simply the size of the opportunity, the fact that it's like a lot of the unknowns, a lot of the dirty work has been done, so to speak, by Uber and Lyft and the big boys, and there's simply nobody taking advantage, and it's very unique. Like if you look at any other territory in the Western world, or even all over the world, there are 3 to 4 rideshare companies vying for a piece of the pie in almost every territory, and Canada is the only territory where there's really only one. I mean, Lyft is here now, but they've been here for a year and a half, 2 years, but they're basically identical to Uber. So you really only have one choice. And that's shocking. In Toronto alone, at a minimum, in fares, Uber is making $700 million a year in fares, just in the city of Toronto. That's not including the subsidiary markets like Mississauga, Richmond Hill, Markham, et cetera, et cetera. And out of that, a large, we would estimate around 200 million is probably profit. So Uber as a whole is losing money, but in certain key markets, they're making money and they're making a lot of it. And nobody's taking advantage of it. That coupled with the fact that when you look at examples in other markets, you'll see there's been a lot of markets where there's been latecomers, so-called latecomers, who are local competitors, and they end up doing very well. So we saw that as really like all systems go. Like this is a clear opportunity. Someone has to take advantage. If everyone else is afraid, we're not going to be. We're going to go in, and we're going to have the home team on our side. We're going to have the home court advantage.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. And a lot of people are afraid to go after a business where there's already people doing it. I hear so many founders, but this person's doing it and that person's doing it, and I always look at them funny and say, name me a business where there isn't competition.
Totally.
Like, if it's a good market, people will be going after it. Investors don't like it if there's no one else going after this market, because then they're like, why?
Yeah. And that's the number one. I've heard from a lot of people, like the number one metric for the success of the company, provided you can execute and do all these things, is the market. Is it the market that's trending? Is it a market that's growing? Does it have a future? And the answer to all those questions for us is yes. It's growing. It's going to move into automated. There's so many frontiers for us to expand.
Absolutely. I see a lot of interesting directions this can go in. Like this definitely is the future. And companies like in our community, you may or may not have heard of a company like Xmatic. They install self-driving technology in cars. You have today anything that you can for under $3,500. Now they do fleet vehicles too, and the fleet vehicles installations are like $500 installed and $100 a month, and includes a lot of data and GPS tracking and all this stuff. But this is just, all this stuff is coming together where, this is a local Canadian startup doing this. You are doing this, and competing head on, because the barriers of entry and the technology are not quite the same. We don't have those $1 million New York medallions and stuff that we have to deal with. So it's interesting to see how now you can innovate and attack these markets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And I mean, that's important to realize that this is not going to go anywhere. Like even if Uber and Lyft go belly up, which part of me hopes they do, there's going to be a huge vacuum. Like this is now part of the culture. Like this appetite for on-demand transportation is not going to go away. And there's so many solutions. It's probably going to integrate in some form with public transit in the future. Automotive is going to get involved. So there's so many sectors that are driving towards this industry.
Yeah, and I see so many different ideas on how this is all going to unfold. Where it's a shared auto car
There's a lot of different
situation where,
models floating around.
yeah, it's just interesting to see this stuff. We'll see how it all shakes out, but it just means that there's so much opportunity here.
There really is. There really
Yeah.
is. And I'm shocked. I'm both happy and shocked that nobody seems to be taking advantage of it, you know? Like if you look at food, even look at Uber Eats, there are other like where they're making a lot of, there's like 4 or 5 places. You got DoorDash, Grubhub, and you can see them all consolidating and cannibalizing each other right now. But yeah, why is it that in rideshare there's only one? I don't get it.
Yeah, and all those other delivery services, we have a few, at least one that I work with, a delivery service in our community. He may or may not be in the chat room, but they do snacks and food and beverages and whatnot, same thing, and compete at a different level than. But that's people are innovating because we want different solutions, and I work and talk to people like Chris Rickett, who is now leading the city of Toronto's drive to recover from COVID and get back to business. And he often posts stuff about how Uber Eats is really hurting restaurants, not helping them. They're taking 30%. They're losing money off every order you order through them. So it's not a attractive a thing for local clients, but at the same time, they want to be present and point of mind, so they need to be have a way for you to order from them.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It seems to be Uber's MO where they just squeeze whoever's providing their key service to the point that they can't, like drivers, you see the same thing. Drivers don't make minimum wage anymore. So this has to happen. This has to happen.
Yeah, and so I want to get back to that in a second, but we just talked about some people came to you and said, we really want to get back into the space. So you said, yes, let's go ahead. You seen your earlier team, not the team you were involved with, not be up to the right level to scale something like this. So finding the right co-founders and the first few key members of your team is so vital and crucial. Can you tell me, how you decided and how you met your current team?
Well, I made a mistake.
Okay.
I made the mistake twice. First, as an investor, I made the mistake investing in the wrong jockey, and then as a founder. I founded it with my friends, good people, talented people, but it wasn't the right mix of skill sets, and it wasn't the right balance in terms of like equity split, just to say it bluntly. So those are things you hear about a lot, common mistakes that founders made, and I made that mistake. Luckily, I was able to get out of it in an amicable way and kind of restructure the organization early on in a way that made sense. But it's very important, and I think that would be like my biggest piece of advice is pick your partners carefully. Definitely recommended to have partners. Doing it on your own is difficult, but you should have, I think they say it's like the hustler, the hipster, and the tinkerer or something, or the builder. Like, so somebody who builds the product, a technical person, somebody who can sell, and then somebody who can market a little bit. And that's kind of like, you need those 3 skill sets. Make sure you have them. So I think that's one of the key mistakes I made is we actually in the beginning, we didn't even have a technical partner. So we had kind of like 3 hustlers, which is useless. So it took us some time to rectify it and realize that was part of the problem, but that's definitely something that we did wrong. Probably one of the things I would recommend you look into very carefully. How do you select? Who do you select? So, you got to align your principles and make sure that your skill sets are complementary and not overlapping. Those are the 2 things.
Yeah, and you said you made this mistake twice, and I meet with founders all the time who have made the taking their feet on correcting it. What's the cost of waiting too long to actually address this kind of problem in a startup?
Huge. The further you go, the more it's probably likely to cause emotions to flare up, and people can, get into conflicts that are probably unnecessary if you can address things at the very beginning, and if you have a deep understanding of what's needed at the beginning, what's fair. I can tell you in my situation, it ended up stalling the company for a few months while we argued. I'm happy to admit it because it was a big mistake and one that I hope others learn from. Be very careful about picking the right people. Make sure that they're useful and make sure that they're rewarded appropriately for the amount of effort they put in and what they're bringing to the table. I think if you can address those questions openly and transparently at the beginning, it's going to save you a lot of headache further down the line.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you have to have those tough conversations ahead of time. And I'm actually working on something called a founder prenup or an entrepreneur prenup, where you when people are getting together at early stage, and I'm working with startups all the time, it takes you through that kind of process, asks you a bunch of questions, and gets everyone kind of sign on the dotted line now early before you're a year in and people aren't doing exactly what people thought they'd be doing, and minds have changed, and now
Mhm.
people are committed and have completely different idea of what they should be getting.
Totally. And money's involved. Once money gets involved too, it becomes more difficult. So
Yeah, so if you have those difficult conversations around the room when it's just an idea, it's so much easier to have. And if you can get people to sign and think about something, so I'm actually drafting up a legal template with my lawyer, and hopefully that'll be up on our site in within a month or so, that people can kind of go through and kind of share with each other, and just kind of walk through to avoid that, because it is a huge problem. Now you mentioned pivoting. Have you pivoted at all during COVID?
so we did a semi pivot. I don't know if I call it a full pivot, but we just so we launched our beta just under a month ago, and we decided that for the period of our beta, we're going to work exclusively with taxis. So we're licensed both as a taxi brokerage and as a PTC, much like Uber and Lyft are. But we've been a little bit clever with how we package it up. And basically, we're working with both private cars and taxis now to provide kind of an equitable system, a fair play system. And like I mentioned to you, because we decided to work only with taxis, we ended up having a lot of kind of happy accidents. So the first one was that our entire fleet right now is hybrid. And that's something we've decided that we want to continue with. Even when we open up the private side, we're going to try to recruit exclusively people with hybrid or electric vehicles. The other thing is we get to help a sector of the industry that's been especially hard hit by the tactics of the competition. So the taxi drivers, their plate used to be, their medallion used to be worth $300,000 to $400,000, and is now selling for under 10,000. So these are people who invested, their whole lives in a car, and over the span of 4 or 5 years have seen their entire pension plan, their entire life savings decimated to nothing. And nobody really cares about them. Uber has Uber Taxi or whatever, but when was the last time anyone ever took an Uber Taxi? So by incorporating them into our system and allowing them to receive fares in the same way without any discrimination or prejudice as the private cars, we've really given them a new avenue for business. And they're like, the reaction and the feedback that we've been getting from them is really positive. They're really excited about it. So we're really happy. This kind of pivot that we had to use has turned out to be beneficial for all the stakeholders.
And so what would you say is your main difference between you and, ordering an Uber or a Lyft?
So I would say it really depends on who you ask. I would say, because I'm a money-oriented person, that price is our main difference. So we don't surge. We're anywhere from 10 to 30% cheaper than Uber, depending on the length of the trip. So we like to say you can get a private car for the price of a pool. Like I said, we're working with taxis, and we're a local company. We're a Toronto company. We're founded here. We're operating here. So any money that you spend on the Ego platform stays in Canada. We're helping to revitalize the taxi space, hopefully bring back some business to them so that they're not just sitting around at Union Station. We also have some other nuances that we haven't been able to exploit directly yet, which we'll probably release towards the end of our beta. So we have something called ladies only mode, which allows female passengers to, if they so desire, to be matched exclusively with female drivers, and vice versa. Female drivers, if they so choose, can be matched exclusively with female passengers. And then the last thing we'll be doing later on in the years, we'll be introducing our Ego Pay system, which will allow you to use crypto to transact on our platform. So we're doing a combination of things that we think really makes us more attractive.
Interesting. I like a lot of that. Now, I just want to ask a couple questions about crypto. Do you see that as being a demand, or do you see that just as being a way to differentiate yourself, so people in that space are going to automatically start moving towards you?
I think both. I think there's definitely a market niche. Like, nobody's doing that. You can't really, there was that Bitcoin craze we had a couple of years back, where you could buy like a bucket of KFC for some Bitcoin, but you can't really transact in any type of crypto right now. So I think that'll be interesting for a lot of people interested in crypto. I think also, if you're looking forward, I don't think you can deny crypto is definitely going to play a role in the future of financial markets. What role is crypto going to play? It's not entirely clear yet. Is it going to be Bitcoin? Is it going to be Ethereum? Is it going to be some other currency? Is our government's going to start making cryptocurrencies? The answer is, I don't know. But I think to think that crypto is going to disappear is kind of, that's not going to happen. I think crypto's around for good, and I think it's going to be a growing market going forward.
I think when people say that it's not going to be around, they just don't understand the technology.
Yeah.
It may not be in the exact same form that it is today or whatnot, but that technology is here to stay. And you probably don't know this, but I ran the Toronto Cryptocurrency Conference for a year and a half. So we had like 15 different conferences with a whole bunch of speakers. I move well in that space. There's a lot of great companies. We work with companies like BitBuy, Token Funder, and a bunch of others that are in our community that we work with. And I still keep in touch with them, but we don't do as much in that space. More, we work with blockchain companies, less than crypto companies, but there's so much going on. A lot of the companies that came out of the blockchain Techstars Accelerator work with us. So there's definitely interest, and the community is growing stronger and stronger again. So it's nice to see what companies are adopting crypto and which ones aren't. So why does Toronto and the world need ego?
The world we'll talk about later. I'm focused mainly on Canada, and Canada starts in Toronto as the biggest city. Toronto, I kind of hit on these points already, but the public is hungry for an alternative. There really isn't one. Like, Lyft is the only alternative, and they kind of came in under the banner of "we're not Uber," and they were successful in capturing like a significant part of the Toronto market, which is a sizable market, just by saying we're not Uber. So if there's an appetite for not Uber, well, we're also not Uber. And as our slogan goes, we're better. So we think that that Toronto needs us because, like, people are hungry. You know, they don't like. So, you know, I don't want to keep ragging on the competition, but like that company doesn't really, it has like negative brand loyalty. People don't want to give their dollars to it, and they're only giving their dollars to it because there's no alternative. So this is why Toronto needs. We are that alternative. We are that local company.
Agreed. A lot of people. There's a lot of dislike for these companies, and specifically in our community. So, if I haven't already, I think we talked previously, but I want to connect you with some people at the city so that they can promote local companies doing this versus, you know, other companies that are hurting local companies.
Yeah, I definitely love that, because I've gone to city council and I've spoken several times about why are we not doing more to help local competition? Why are we just ready to hand over hundreds of millions of dollars to these American monoliths? I don't understand. It's unfortunate, but it would be great if we could, work together, not only with the people of the city, but the city itself to provide that alternative.
And everyone talks about hustle, you know, and you've got some really tough competition and ingrained brands that people are naturally ready just to pull up their phone and use.
Totally.
What are you doing to get traction in building your audience?
Well, we're doing a lot of like person-to-person engagement. So on the driver's side, it's really about getting out in the street, not necessarily shaking hands during COVID time, but bumping elbows with the drivers, really figuring it out. You know, what is it that they're missing right now? How can we better serve them? And creating a community. So like, I know almost every one of our drivers by name right now. We don't have too many. I'm sure we won't be able to do that forever. And then each one of those drivers kind of turns into his own marketing center. So, you know, they're coming to us and asking us for flyers, and they're standing out at Union flyering people for us because they're invested in, they need this. They need this tool to be able to get business, right? Because they don't have any digital means of dispatch. And on the passenger side, we're doing similar things. So, I mean, there's the obvious stuff, right? Like the digital advertising, all those things to get your awareness up. But again, it's like, let's go to Trinity Bellwoods as a street team and engage with groups of people at a time and let them know. And we're getting a lot of great feedback like that. Because when you got a group of 5 or 6 people having a good time, you'd be like, hey, we're Toronto's rideshare. A lot of times like, wow, this is such a great idea. I'll definitely use that. And then you leave that group of 5 or 6 people talking about you oftentimes one or two of them is downloading your app on the spot. So for us at this point in our beta, and because we're so small, it's really been about as much human engagement as we can get to kind of get that ball rolling, get the awareness, get people word of mouth going, get people talking about it in groups. And that's been really helpful. We've been seeing a lot of traction just over the last 3 to 4 weeks. We're getting close to 1,000 downloads. So that's really good with minimal advertising. We're not spending a lot of money. So if we continue to see this trend, we're going to be right on target by the end of the summer. But largely it's about, you know, appealing to what resonates with people. There's this saying that people make emotional decisions for logical reasons. So you got to give them those logical reasons. You know, we're cheaper, we're greener, we're local, all these things. But then, you know, what can you do to appeal to their emotion and make them like you, make them love you? And that's what we've been trying to do is just appeal to that, you know, the hometown spirit and, the fact that we're new and exciting and people like to be involved in new and exciting startups. So trying to find those little angles for entry into people's psychology.
You know, and I just, you've probably already thought about stuff like this, but I'm thinking coasters for patios with ego on them, with your 3 value propositions on one side, and on the other side, you know, you're drinking, let us drive you home, and download the app, blah, blah, blah.
I'm going to take that idea, Craig. That's, sorry, you just gave me that one.
That's quite okay. I mean,
for example, with PPE, we've done that. So we have packages that all our cars have. Each package has a mask, a gloves, and a single-use hand sanitizer. Same thing. You open it up, it's got a nice little message in it. But that bars one is good. I'm going to take that.
Because it's now you're in a place where, hey, yeah, I would normally do an Uber, but why wouldn't I download this? I'm sitting and have a drink. I'll do it now while I'm, you know, it's just a thought. You don't know if it's going to work. And because patios are opening now, you can do a limited run and see if you get traction.
Definitely. I mean, we've already been doing that since the patios have been open. We've got people flyering the patio area. Sometimes it's not as easy to engage those people, both because of COVID and also because they're in their group. The parks have been a little easier from that respect to engage people. But getting the coasters on the tables, that's a really good idea.
The other thing maybe, and this might work, is co-branding T-shirts with bars, waitresses and whatnot. Where, you know, they've got the front thing on the back and drive safe, ride ego on the back, and then everyone knows, hey, all the waitresses and all the staff know about it and know how to download it and that kind of thing. It's just
true. Yeah, we're working on one partnership in particular, which is going in that direction.
Cool, because that means they're engaging it. Because yeah, with COVID, you can't just walk up to a table. And like, I remember, I run an accelerator, and this was a disaster. But I, speaking of mistakes, I took my team, our accelerator class, at one time to a bar to go bar hopping because I said, you know, you guys are standing and just looking at your feet, pitching your product. How do you make someone care? So let's go out and say, you've got to go out and get someone, you know, and pitch your product to random people who are drinking. They're not here for you. Anyway, it turned out to be a complete disaster, but the approaching people in the situation where they're not is difficult. So when you have someone they're already engaged with, who's kind of a spokesman, I think it would add a lot of value.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And we're working on something. I'm not going to talk too much about it.
Of course, yeah. Sorry,
Not at all. Great idea, and we're working in that direction as we speak.
So we talked a little bit about investors, and I like when I'm talking to startups when they're getting serious about meeting with VCs and angels. The saying I say is you should be meeting 100 investors in 5 weeks if you're serious about investing. How was your investment journey, and you know, what can you share about that insight or something different?
For me, that was probably the most difficult part, and we're still going through it. I mean, there's always like a new hurdle, a new financing round to approach. But yeah, it's probably something like that. You got to meet a lot of people. You got to take a lot of no's, just like you're selling your business in a way. So like any salesperson will tell you, you know, it's a lot of no's before you get that yes. So it takes some patience, some persistence, some perseverance. I think for me, it started to become easier as I built out the product. You know, I always think of that, is it Field of Dreams, where you talk, build it and they will come. So I got really frustrated because I thought I had a really good package at every step of the way. Every time it would be like, you know, I'd hit a bunch of meetings and then I'd get discouraged, and then I'd, you know, go focus on another part of the business, and then hit some more meetings and then get discouraged. And it was kind of like that pattern. But it definitely started to become easier. And the further we go along, like now that we've released beta and, you know, we're operational, there's there's more interest. And so it was definitely difficult. You have to take a lot of no's. You have to be able to keep your head high in face of rejection and not let other people's opinions necessarily affect you too much. But it's a full-time job in and of itself, and it's not easy. And for me, especially, like, I don't think, like, I've never asked people for money in my life, in my professional career. So that's another aspect, is how do you get to that ask? How do you be like, okay, can I have $1 million? You know, it's not an easy situation.
I agree. It isn't an easy situation, and it's funny when I talk to founders. They usually have one of two sides of it, which is your side, where, like, how do you go ask somebody for $1 million, or they have the other. I can't find anybody to give me $10 million. I'm like, okay, do you understand what you're asking for? And,
Yeah.
like, the answer lies somewhere in between the two, obviously, right? So.
Yeah.
But it's usually tough because they're not just have money lying around they're throwing. It's a business. They have to qualify the investment, and are you ready, and believe in you, and you're the people you were talking to months and months ago, where now you've got a beta and you've got stuff out there and you got drivers in the street. You've shown now that you've done all these things. They're
Exactly.
probably
Yeah.
way more interested in talking to you.
But that's exactly right. It's people you met along the way, and now they're circling back. Oh, I saw one of your ads on Instagram. So it's exactly that. The more, like, you got to look at it kind of like fundable events. What are the milestones you've hit to de-risk it and to prove, like, what I've been saying all along can and will happen if we continue on this path. And kind of the more of those fundable events that you manage to stack in your favor, the more attractive the opportunity becomes to those people you're trying to get money out of.
Yeah, and building a company is tough. People don't realize how tough it is. And when you're trying to grow and scale, investors really want to know, when the going gets tough and you have no money left and your credit cards are broken, you got to figure out how to way you're going to pay your employees. Are you going to get up off the couch and go to work and make a miracle happen? Or are you going to call it quits? So seriously, like this, you laugh, but is that not the truth?
I mean, yeah, that's the truth. You want to see what these people are made of. I know, like, we've been through that segment, so that's why I laugh. But definitely, and I think the other thing, kind of maybe the naive misconception, is that you're going to go in, you're going to have a fabulous pitch, you're going to answer every question perfectly, and they're going to write the check right there on the spot. And it just doesn't work like that. Even if you're fantastic and everything is right, it still might take 5, 6, 7 meetings before you get a significant amount of money out of anyone.
Yeah, and then due diligence and all the stuff. I mean,
Of
it's
course.
months. It's months.
Yeah, yeah, and that should be expected. If you go in with that expectation, you're going to be a lot less. I guess you're going to take it a lot less personally when you go through that process. And it makes sense, because if you're coming to me to ask for $100, I might ask you a couple of questions. If you're going to ask me for $1 million, I'm going to take my time and make sure that you're not going to lose my $1 million.
Absolutely. And we got a nice question from the audience here. So how do you balance the supply and demand side of ego? In particular, how do you work with drivers who might be bored one night and overloaded the next?
Very difficult. So this is the hardest part of this specific business model, is this the very beginning, when you don't have enough critical mass to balance the two. And we faced this challenge and overcame it at that first company I was at. But it's just a lot of hustle. Like, really, it's about aligning expectations, first of all. So making sure that your drivers know what to expect, and also your passengers. So, like, letting your passengers know we're in a beta. Our coverage is not as good as our competition's right now. You might wait a couple extra minutes. So if they know that going in, they're not going to be like, oh, I had to wait 6 minutes instead of 3. Cancel this app, right? So tempering expectations, I think, is a big one. Also, it's like chicken and egg, right? So you mentioned, right, if I have too many drivers and not enough passengers, the drivers are going to be bored. They're not going to keep coming online because they're not getting enough fares. And vice versa, if I have too many passengers and all my drivers are used up, passengers who come online are going to think that there's never any drivers available, and they're going to get upset. So it's really like, you got to push it up a little bit here, push it up, try to move them in sync. And oftentimes it starts with the drivers. So in our case, we've been, like I said, we have strong relationships with our drivers. So we can, on the weekends and during the busy times, we dispatch them, we position them, and we give them a little bit of compensation for that, because they're working exclusively with us. So in the beginning, that's what we're doing to try and balance that, make sure that the drivers are able to address the demand wherever it might be.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Paul. So, do you have any tips for founders who are just getting their business going?
uh, Keep going, get started, keep going. It's tough, like you said. Um, I think consistent, persistent perseverance and patience is really important. A lot of it's going to be like philosophical advice, right? Because the business advice you can get from a lot of places, but I think it's really grueling on. It's very character building in that sense. Important not to hear the naysayers, but not listen too much. Take into account, adjust accordingly. But sometimes you might be smarter than the person who's giving you advice, and give yourself permission to be smarter than those people. Um, and yeah, find a way to put some love in it, because it's going to take a lot out of you. So if you don't have at least some aspect of it that you can figure out how to love, you're not going to have the perseverance to be able to keep going. I think those would be my tips. They're kind of like high level tips, but that's where I found the most difficulty, because the business stuff, all those things you can figure out.
I agree, and it's I think you hit it. Keep going is and learn. And we have another question here in the chat room, but before we jump into that, you said about it's okay to be smarter than your advisor or your mentor on this particular subject or that. How do you pick advisors, or like how does that process work? Everyone's always looking for mentors in our community and whatnot, but how do you use your advisors, and where do you find them?
So are we talking about strategic advisors or more of like mentors?
I'm going to say mentors.
Mentors? Then I would say the number one thing you have to do is take advice from people who are in the position that you want to be in. I see a lot of people taking advice from people who are not in the position that they want to be in, right? So if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, take advice from successful entrepreneurs. Take advice from other business owners. Don't go take advice from financial analysts or people who revolve around, the business that you're trying to enter into the business or the industry. Take advice from the person who's in the position that you would deem successful. Because those other people, they might have theoretical knowledge. They might even be right, but they haven't done it. So I don't know how much that advice is worth.
I couldn't agree more. So in our community, that's why we have so many different people, that we can always connect you with somebody who's 6 months or a year or 2 years ahead of you on your journey in a similar area that can really help you. So it's always about getting that next step, and it's finding those right people. So we got a question here, and I didn't know this, but they saw that you used to be a surgeon and an actor. What made you decide to become an entrepreneur and leave those great careers behind?
Again, I don't think it was a decision. I kind of ended up here. And I think it's maybe like a personality trait. I mean, so to answer the question simply, I always wanted to be an actor when I was younger. At the beginning of this interview, we talked a little bit about how I was academically gifted when I was young, and I was kind of guided in that direction, academics. But I always wanted to be an actor, and I had this image of myself that I was, what I was going to become. And I was a very successful young surgeon in Switzerland, making tons of money, winning awards for my research, had a great job, but I realized it wasn't the vision I had for myself. So I took this big risky decision to take a year off from surgery. I kind of knew I was quitting, but I phrased it as a year off, and I came back to Toronto to start my career as an actor. And I've been acting. I have over 20 film and TV credits. I'm on Netflix, I'm on Amazon, etc. And it's a great career, but it's unlike most professional careers. It's not linear in terms of how you progress. So there's some luck involved. Unlike what people think, there is also a lot of persistence, consistency, perseverance, and patience involved in the acting industry. But I guess how I ended up being an entrepreneur is, like I said, as an actor, I had some free time. When you're not on a project, you have a lot of free time. I became an investor in that other company, and then I just started to get involved in the operations to protect my investment, as I said. And then like a year later, I had all this experience. I had, this track record, and it just kind of, it was a good opportunity. So I rolled with it, and that's how I ended up here. So it's not your typical career path, but it's mine.
So how do you want passengers to feel when they take an Ego?
I would love for them to feel, for one, I'd like we really try to concentrate on safety. So I'd like them to know that we know all our drivers by in person. So I'd like them to feel that they're getting an extension of that, feel a little bit safer knowing that they're part of our family. I'd love for them to feel like they're supporting, again, if we're in the family theme, that they're supporting, the home team, that they're supporting a local company. And we really do believe in those values, honesty, integrity, transparency, safety, quality, fairness. So I really, what I want is, for you to have a great experience. You have a friendly driver, everything you're expecting from the app works as you would expect, and you leave with a smile on your face, right? That kind of X factor experience. Now, is that something we can quantify? If you do this, that. Yes, perhaps, but I think it really works down to the love we put in. Again, we really are looking at this company, our drivers, as our family, and by extension, our customers. We welcome you into our home, and we would hope that you have a nice experience, that we're able to present some form of hospitality for those 10 minutes that you're with us, and make you feel good, like make you feel glad that you spent your money with us and not someone else. So that's the emotional experience I'd like to deliver if we can figure out that alchemy.
And that sounds great. And we got another question here in the chat room. Really want to focus on your business model a bit. You say Ego is both cheaper than Uber and gives the drivers a better deal. So does that generally mean there's less money left over for Ego? Could you talk a little bit about the economics and your long-term, growth?
Sure. Well, obviously, the conclusion is exactly right. If we're taking less from the passenger and less from the driver, we must be making less. So that's true. Like I said, Uber in this city, at least as far as we calculate, is making a fair bit of money. So there is profit to be made. As far as our models are concerned, we're very confident that we will be profitable in a single market like Toronto within about 24 months. That's what we've predicted. It's very aggressive, but a lot of it comes from our ability to be more nimble, and from the fact that a lot of the dirty work has already been done.
Uh-oh. Can anybody else see him, or did he freeze up?
Actually, they've been paying people to use their product. They can no longer afford to pay people to do that, and we kind of don't have to. So we can just come right in, be a little bit cheaper, be a little bit nicer, and take some of that market back. And according to our model, and we're very confident in our model, we can achieve profitability relatively quickly.
So what's the next step for you and Ego?
Next step after, we're going to focus on Toronto for the first part. It's the largest market in Canada and one of the largest in North America. Once we've proven concept in Toronto, we'll be looking to other markets. The big city, Vancouver just recently opened up, so we're not even that late there. Montreal, Ottawa, expansion locally into Canada. And then on the technology front, we'll be building out new and exciting features. Payment processing, we talked a little bit about. Also looking into what we can do with automated when the time comes for that. And some other kind of cool ideas we have on the horizon to make our platform, if we can, a little bit more than just a ride-sharing experience. So if we have some pretty neat products planned out that are going to complement our core service. And it's not going to be traditional, just to remove some of the mystery. It's not going to be, we're not going to do Ego Eats. That's not something we're looking at.
And the website is www.rideego.com.
That's correct. Ride Ego. Anywhere you go, we go. And you can also find us in the App Store on iOS or Android by typing EGO. I think we come up second or third. There's a lawnmower company in the States that does electric lawnmowers that comes up before us. But if you look for this logo, that's us.
Excellent. And I put the link in the chat room here on the website. They have the link to the App Store and the Google Play Store. So feel free to support a local Toronto startup that's trying to make a change and make a difference, and download the app. And next time you go out, grab an Ego. Any parting words for our audience?
No, I think you said it. I hope that we've inspired some of you to download the app and give us a try, and continue to support us as we work our way through our beta. We look forward to having some of you on board.
So thank you for taking the time to be part of Startup Talk today. I really appreciate it, you sharing your experience and advice with our audience.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate you bringing me on.